All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our second session on our second day of Arts Days in Kentucky. This is And the Band Played On, and I'm going to give you a little bit of context for this session. I actually thought of it before I even invited anybody to participate based on some, some research that I did when I first took this position. So I guess I'll start with the statistical background. So recently, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies released their 2020 Creative Economy state profiles, and those describe statistically the value of the arts and cultural production in every state during the first year of the pandemic. And the mathematical picture, as you can imagine, is kind of abysmal. However, statistics are not lived experiences. And while they detail the impact of the problem that we faced, they don't paint the full picture of how Kentucky organizations kept on keeping on, creating solutions to those problems as they emerged. As an aside, I'd also like to add that the 36 key industries representing core arts and arts supporting production ranked fourth among the comparison sectors in Kentucky. We outproduced utilities, agriculture and forestry, mining and education service. So it's not all bad when you comb for internal competition. So I wanted to make sure I balanced that sort of sad statistic with something a little happier. But when I came into this position at the Arts Council in September, one of the first things that I did was to hold 2 community conversations with arts organizations across the state. With about 40 in attendance for each, I asked the same question of everyone. Tell me about some of the ways that your organization has adapted during the pandemic to continue serving Kentuckians. There were lots of answers ranging from we shuttered our doors to we completely reimagined the way that we do things and we're never going back. We're operating this way forever, and everything in between, of course. And I was especially struck by the stories from orchestras. Maybe it's because I have a background in playing violin terribly, so I felt like I can relate a little bit. But this is a group that has sometimes formal professional ensembles that are almost as large as their audiences. So you have 2 groups large groups that you have to care for in these times. And they've traditionally relied quite heavily on in-person engagement. So of course they were affected deeply. And I invited 4 of these organizations today to talk about their lived experiences, sort of in contrast or in comparison to those numerical statistics, and to serve as a microcosm for Kentucky's arts infrastructure. So I think a lot of the things that they're going to say today will be relatable to museums, small arts organizations and guilds, certainly multidisciplinary organizations. You know, the misery loves company and some of the problems were universal, right? And so I've asked them to share their pandemic responses, the ways that they've adapted, the challenges they face, and the lessons that they're going to be carrying into the future. And so I'm really lucky to have with me on this St. Patrick's Day, Allison Brody from the Louisville Youth Orchestra, Alyssa Brody from the Louisville Youth Orchestra, Allison Kaiser from the Lexington Philharmonic, Faith Hawley from the Owensboro Symphony Orchestra, and Michelle Winter from the Louisville Orchestra. And each of them are going to give an overview of their experience, and then we're going to have a couple of pointed questions, and then we'll take some from the audience. And I would like for Alyssa to go first. She's ready.
Thank you, Sarah. So the very first thing that I want to do is put something in the chat if you're able to access this. But one of the really important things that we needed to be on top of was just a lot of data. And there's great data out there already. So I have a few links that I'll provide here that were very useful for me at the state and county level, as well as for our district. The Louisville Youth Orchestra has around 200 students this year. And so we actually don't just have students from Jefferson County, but because that's the majority, we looked at the COVID numbers there. And I will say we quite a bit. My staff is quite small and the only full-time staff, but I worked very, very closely with our music director, Doug Elmore. And we have a specific committee called the Health and Safety Committee in our board of directors. So they were integral in making a lot of decisions last year and this year for us. Mostly in making decisions, we look at the positivity rates in the community level and the rolling weekly confirmed cases, especially locally. It was very useful for me in making decisions to be able to cite the CDC as well as needed, as well as any state mandates. So I would just say that if you're in a position of making any decisions, as I was suddenly thrust into in a new position, I started in July, really relying on the experts and the sources out there was key, and making it a very discussion-based group decision when changing anything. So the Louisville Youth Orchestra had a very, very impacted season last season in that they held no in-person concerts, but they did rehearse. And some of our larger orchestras were split in half in order to accommodate large distancing measures, which was useful. They brought in some staff to help work with winds and brass. We already have a percussion coach who took those students, and then the strings were separate from the winds and the brass in our largest group, Symphony Orchestra. And they reworked some of the other orchestras as well to change the numbers and just make sure that the students were safely able to distance during rehearsals. This year, and they had one major concert at the end of the season, which was in the gym at Floyd Central High School. So that was a nice large space. But this year is quite different. We went back to having in-person concerts, as the others here will probably talk about, and felt very safe in doing so with some of the precautions we have in place. We were able to go back to a very normal season by requiring our students to follow what we call the playing safe protocols. And those cover several different mitigating factors, such as masking, bell covers, all students mask whether or not they're playing a wind instrument. So those people who are on, let's say, oboe or trumpet are wearing a mask with a slit in it to cut down on the aerosols from the nose. There's been studies on that, and nobody really likes it, but they've all been very cooperative. We also have our students distanced at different levels based on age. And at the beginning of this season, as many of you know, the ages for who would be able to be vaccinated, it hadn't really quite reached that the younger population. So we were concerned about our more vulnerable groups and made sure to distance them as much as possible in rehearsal spaces. And since then, they've been able to get vaccinated if they've chosen to. We do not have a requirement for that with our students, and we actually do not ask them directly, if at all possible, in order to let it be a space where the students' families can feel secure being with us either way, and welcome. We do break after 40 minutes after some aerosol studies for that as well with air exchange rates. It helps our students as well to have that social experience. And it's been really key for this age group to be able to do that, not only to have an enriching arts experience with their peers, something that they might not have gotten at all during the previous year with NTI, but then to come together and to make music and not just to sit distance, but also to have a quick 10-minute break every 40 minutes and have, for example, some group mixers that might get them to interact, some question prompts, things that maybe students these days might need in order to have to reach out to talk with their peers and stay away from their phones. But we still see quite a bit of that. I might talk about that later. We have pre-screening forms that students always fill out before they come to every rehearsal. They get them as they walk in. We shared them with the parents early in the season if they wanted to talk over the questions, just about whether they've had any recent symptoms, if they've been exposed recently. Parents have been asked to reach out if the students have been in any family close contact situations or with school contact exposures. That has been probably one of the leading causes of busyness in my role this year is just responding a lot to the families when they have questions for that. But we find that having the CDC exposure guidelines really helps to just have a clear-cut case for what we can ask the students and the families to do, and how long they should just hold off in coming back to rehearsals. We do temperature checks for important points within our season, but not every week. So for example, during the surge in January and February, we asked the students to have a quick contactless thermometer check. And we do that before each concert, just to ensure that as they're a little closer together and sharing the stage, everybody is healthy and safe, hopefully, presumably. Our parents are not allowed to come into our rehearsal spaces, which is an interesting move for a youth organization, but it cuts down on a lot of people being in the same space, congregating unnecessarily. And we've staggered our entry times as well, so that whereas we might have all started at 2 o'clock for several of our full orchestras, now they'll start at 2 o'clock, 2:15, just enough time to make sure that there's a little time and space. The surge was an interesting time for us in January and early February. We were required we weren't required. I decided that I wanted to make sure our students could be as safe as possible. I took a very cautious stance, while also leaning on my health and safety committee to help me make decisions during that time. And we ended up only having to cancel one of our rehearsals, but we did for several weeks go to Zoom sectionals. And then after about 2 weeks, we brought the students back in very minimal numbers, whereas they would typically meet for anywhere from 30 students to 55 students at a time. We capped it at about a dozen students meeting for shortened sectionals. And that proved actually very useful in ensuring that the families felt safe. We created a new policy during that time for our attendance requirements, that they could simply be excused out of caution during the surge. And some families took us up on that, but primarily the students were excited to show up in a setting that cared about their safety. And it was very useful, again, to have a health and safety committee discussion each week, so that those decisions didn't fall just on me in terms of sending out our information. And I could say that really it was a team decision, team discussion. We use several different concert venues, some of which we have any options for audience protocols, and some of which are decided for us, for example, by the Kentucky Center for the Performing Arts. And those have ranged from our own requirements being that the audience mask, to the Kentucky Center's stricter requirements, which are entry protocols of proof of vaccination for all, and or a negative PCR test, I think, within a certain number of hours. So the parents have been very cooperative about this, as long as they've gotten massive amounts of communication. And I will just emphasize over and over that if people learn about your expectations and the reasons for them with plenty of time to respond or ask questions, I have at least found out that they have been incredibly willing to work with us, especially if we've been a little bit more on the cautious end to keep our more vulnerable students healthy. The last thing I'll say is capacity has been lower in our concerts, and I don't view that as a bad thing. I think that it makes people comfortable to be able to come into a general admission setting, which is what we go with, and be able to see that they can move anywhere, and to see that there are pockets in the hall where they can have quite a bit of distance if they should choose that. But also they can get nice and close if that's also what they want. So while it's been very negative for our ticket revenue, I think it's come with a real lift in making sure that the families just feel like there are great modifications for everybody. Lastly, I'll say most other organizations probably do this already, but primarily we had relied on in-person ticket sales as the majority of our ticket sales, and those have moved now primarily to online ticket sales with will call pickup, just to keep the lines moving very, very quickly before concerts. Exposure in general between our students has been completely we haven't had any cases that I've known of. Well, we've had exposures where students have come into rehearsals not knowing they had COVID, but we have not had any spread with the various mitigations that we've had in place. So I'm pleased to say that with everything that is under consideration with younger students, it's been a very successful year so far with everything we've tried to put in place. I don't want to take too long, so Sarah, should I continue? That's about 10 minutes.
Yeah, that will. Do you have any other points you'd like to hit on?
I yeah, I can pass it along. I'm happy to say other things
That
later.
sounds good. We can save it for questions too. Allison, you're next.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for that, Alyssa. So many of our protocols at the Lexington Philharmonic involving players are very similar to the protocols that Alyssa has outlined. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on that part because a lot of it would be repeating what Alyssa has said about how we're keeping our musicians safe, everything from pre-screening forms to masking to social distancing on stage. What I would like to talk about is how we reapproached and reimagined programming in this time. And when COVID started, we realized that we could only do maybe outdoor concerts, and for our own ability to learn as we tried new things, we started with very small ensemble programs. So we started with a program called Let's Fill in Your Neighborhood, where we literally put a quintet on a flatbed and pulled it around with a truck in partnership with our Division of Parks and Recreation. And we went to 14 different neighborhoods with this program and performed short pop-up type concerts. And then we started doing stationary outdoor concerts and we were able to grow the size of the ensemble a bit in doing that. And these were also socially distanced outdoors. During 2021, we did no ticketed events, meaning we didn't sell any tickets. We required registration for our events so that we could get a sense of the attendance and what we needed to plan for. And we did have attendance caps on even our outdoor events, just so that we could make sure that the outdoor space where the audience would be enjoying the concert, that it was safe and that they were safe. We also, so during the warmer months, we were able to do several outdoor concerts. We were able to do Let's Fill in Your Neighborhood. And then we also turned to a lot of video programming. We did not do any full concert recordings or live streams, but what we started was an educational series called Connect, where we would interview different individuals on different topics. And I will drop into the chat the links to both the videos of our outdoor concerts during the pandemic and our Connect programs. And I also need to let everybody know that during all of this, we've been in a situation where we've not had a music director. We started a music director search in the 1920 season that got cut short by the pandemic. So we're in the process now of trying to complete that music director search. So during COVID, we actually hired an interim artistic advisor that helped us with a lot of our repertoire and programming choices. But anyway, what we're finding interesting is how we now move from all of those new and different types of programming and platforms that we provided during the pandemic. How do we integrate those now into a programming season that looks more normal than what it has for the last 2 years? And in our case, one of the biggest obstacles is resources. So we have a small staff. And during the pandemic, we were down to a staff of 4. Now we're back up to a staff of 7 full-time, and then contract with our interim artistic advisor. So we're in the process right now of trying to plan next season. And I won't forget about talking about this season, but how we're building the thread and the bridge from the wonderful new programming that we were able to initiate during the pandemic, and how do we keep some of the wonderful parts of this that we discovered. And one of the things that we discovered is those small outdoor concerts, those small ensemble pop-up concerts, or those concerts that we held in public parks across the pandemic were hugely popular. And we were able to have the opportunity to do some really experimental types of programming. For example, we did a big hip hop program this past June, and that was called Beat of the Heartland. And we did that in collaboration with a local hip hop artist. And we had string arrangements written for his original music. And we're now looking for a way to translate some of those pieces into full orchestra. But that was a program that we had really dreamed about for 2 years before COVID even hit. And COVID gave us the opportunity to do it. So it was, when you're not consumed with trying to do your main stage programming, your subscription programming, and all your educational commitments, it really did provide the space to try some of the things that we had dreamed about doing for years. Now our challenge is how do we keep that in our budget? How do we keep that in our consciousness? Because so much of our regular season programming is tied to the collective bargaining agreement and the number of services and how many musicians have to participate in each program. And so, that is always sort of the driver behind so much of what an orchestra does and where they put their resources is what is required through your collective bargaining agreement. So we're trying to find a way to build forward, keeping these wonderful new smaller programs that we know our community is loving, and how do we carry those forward along with our larger full orchestra type programs in a traditional performance space. And one of the things that we are now doing is we're looking at Lexville in your neighborhood, and we're looking at our educational programs. So we've combined sort of the spirit of both of those into a reimagined Sound Explorers program. And that those programs are very family friendly. They're geared toward older toddlers and the children in primary grades. And those are going to be offered. We're going to be reintroducing those this spring in various different locations throughout the community, community centers, libraries, and different spaces that are open and free to the public. So we will be trying to take that concept and that idea of Lexville in your neighborhood and moving that toward very family-friendly type programs. And then we're also looking for ways to continue our virtual presence and continuing to use those as a way for our audience members to learn more deeply and more contextually about the programs that we're doing on main stage. We're still in the process of trying to figure out, because during the pandemic, one of the things that we changed was our contributed giving model. And we played with a membership model, again, because we weren't doing any paid concerts, any ticketed concerts during the pandemic. We had to completely reconfigure donor benefits and figure that out. Now we're in the process of, now that we're going back into some more traditional programming in looking at a season, which we did introduce this year. And our spring programming is very close to the type of programming that we did pre-pandemic. But now we're looking at how do we evolve these revenue models, both the ticketing side and the donor side, to allow more flexibility so that things are not tied in lockstep to a main stage subscription season. So those are the challenges that we're facing right now. And I could go on, but Sarah, I want to be cognizant of time and any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Faith?
Good morning. All right. Well, first I have to say that I joined the Owensboro Symphony in May of 2021. So a lot of what I'm talking about happened before I got here, and I'm replacing Gwen, our CEO, this morning. So when I say we, in some context, it's really just the Owensboro Symphony, and then sometimes it also includes me. So there were several initiatives. I will tell you that the symphony was had played its 4th concert of a 5-concert season when the world shut down. So that last concert was canceled, and they offered a process of giving people vouchers for tickets to use on the next season, which we did not end up having. So it just carried over to our 21-22 season, which we have been able to move forward with in its usual context. However, we did some shifting of dates. In October, we usually have our opening season concert, and we knew that it was probably going to be too early to do that. So we pushed our first concert to our holiday concert, which is called Home for the Holidays, and moved kind of our season opening act to the end of our season. So that will happen in May with One Fine Night with Michael Feinstein, which we're very much looking forward to because it's been postponed twice. So there were a lot of programming things that we tried, and also things that we expanded over the pandemic seasons. One of the things that we offered was a Meet the Musicians. It was through our eBlast system, and it was a bio and photos and people talking about their time, or musicians talking about their time with the Owensboro Symphony. Our public loved that. They got kind of an inside view. We have a program, and we've had it for many years, called Music on Call. It is small ensembles that are out in the community, but we had typically focused that more on healthcare facilities, nursing homes, things like that. And of course, we couldn't do that. So we took those performances and expanded that program to think similar to what Allison was talking about with the Lex Bill. We didn't have a flatbed truck, but we also had neighborhood parks where we would have a brass quintet or string quartet. We also had this symphony at the market. For the month of June, we had small ensembles playing each Saturday at our local farmers market, which was such a fun partnership, and we're gonna probably continue that this summer. And let's see, one of the biggest, well, I should say, we did videotape a series or a concert called Safe at Home for the Holidays. In partnership with KET, we were able to do small ensembles again on the stage at our home stage at River Park Center, and then launched that. And actually, they played it again this Christmas. So one of the biggest changes was a new program that we call Symphony Stroll. And I'm going to share my screen as I talk about this so you can see some photos. Let's see. All right, is that working? So Symphony Stroll took place of our typical opening night on September 26th, 2020. Owensboro is lucky. We have a beautiful riverfront. And I just thought you might like to take a picture. Look at that. On your lower right hand, you'll see what we call the Batwing stage.
Okay. Just one second. It may not be true for everybody, but it looks like I'm actually seeing your PowerPoint program, but I'm not able to
trying.
see the presentation part of it. Yeah.
Hang
which is
on.
something that I do all the time. So
Let me stop share and I'll try this all over again. I'm going to go. Oh, it completely went away. I'm so sorry. I had it in presentation mode. Let's do slideshow. I'm so sorry. I'm technologically not advanced.
it's not easy on Zoom because you have to not only choose the right program, but the right screen if you're looking at 2 monitors. So
Right. I only have 1 monitor. So, well, shoot. But now I can't see my screen to share. So, well, I'm going to try this one more time and then I'm not going to waste your time anymore.
you know what we can do? We could always make it a PDF and share it with folks after the fact so they can get some.
That is true. So you know what? In the essence of time, I'm just going to say I'm going to share this with you as a PDF afterwards.
Describe it vividly for us.
I will do my best. So we have a beautiful riverfront. It's just over a mile long and it's capstoned by River Park Center, our performing arts center on the east side, and then on the west side, our convention center. We have beautiful outdoor spaces like the Batwing Amphitheater. But we also have grassy spots and covered gazebos and things like that. So Symphony Stroll featured 5 ensembles. It was a string chamber ensemble, brass quintet, string quartet, percussion trio, which was a little bit of a favorite because people don't get to see up close sometimes that the marimbas and xylophones and things like that. And then we had a jazz trio on the patio of the River Park Center. We just encouraged folks to move as they felt comfortable. Each spot had a QR code that would lead you to the program. So people could scan it and they could see, you know, who's playing, what they're playing. We had no real schedule for each of the groups. We just wanted them to play between 6 and 9. So they would take breaks as they needed. And some of them repeated programming, but because people were moving up and down, it was just fine. It was so popular the first year that we brought it back again, October 1st of 2021. And we're looking at making it a part of our opening weekend in October of this year. So we'll still have our typical October opening night performance, but we're thinking on the Thursday before we could have Symphony Stroll as a way to kind of generate some more interest. Things that we're seeing people that we don't normally see in the concert hall, which just makes us so happy. We see families bringing their children, which you wouldn't necessarily see at a lot of our concerts because they're later in the evening. I wanted to share with you just some of the comments that we got from our performers. They said it's going to be great to get outside and create music together, which we are all so desperate to do. It's not just an event for symphony goers, it's all about the community. It's a great way to try symphonic music in a casual way. So especially for those first time symphony goers, this is a great way for them to get a taste of it and hopefully choose to purchase a ticket later. From the attendees, we heard things like, I was so ready to get out. This is wonderful. Owensboro seemed to forget about the worldwide pandemic and enjoyed an evening out on the town. The stroll offered a place for guests to spread out. It was a beautiful evening. I don't know who thought of it, but it's a great idea and the price is right because it was free. Our leadership, Gwen, she said that evening was exactly what they envisioned. It was an evening that the whole community could enjoy in a safe manner. And the genesis of this program is that she was committed to remaining visible and relevant in our community. And so in 2021, like most others, there was not a single paid performance. All of our performances were for free. And we're keeping some of that. And like I said, we've expanded Music on Call, and we're lucky that we have good funding for that. And we're seeing more come in because of those programs. So Symphony Stroll was also an entirely new sponsorship opportunity. The first year, there was a sponsor just for the whole event. This year, we actually had sponsors for various stops. And so we're looking at expanding that. So we're able to actually get more funding for a program that we weren't sure we'd ever have funding for. So with that, thank you for letting me share, and I'll be open for questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. I actually posted a Google Maps link so that you can look at Owensboro's riverfront and get an idea of the proximity, how close River Park is to the park where they did the stroll, and kind of, give you an idea of what that sort of, just picture musicians there, and then
Yeah. I'm going to create a PDF right now and put it in the chat.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you. That'll give everybody a chance to look at it at their own leisure too. So.
Yeah.
And then Michelle.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Great to be here, and just listening to everybody's experiences is really kind of great, because as orchestras in Kentucky, we need to do this more, guys. We need to talk to each other more. Alyssa's experience and outline of the precautions really is very similar to what we did with the Louisville Orchestra. Of course, we had a sold out concert that we shut down in March of 2020, which broke our hearts. We were so blessed, though, that for the for the audience, of course, there was this sense that this was not going to go on and last as long as it has. So the initial impetus of the audience was to donate all of their tickets back. We probably had 6 or 7 concerts that we ended up canceling. They started falling like dominoes, one and then another until we finally sort of embraced the idea that it was over for the 1920 season, and we canceled many concerts at the end in the spring of 2020. So, but we had about 62 to 65% of people actually donated the value of their tickets back to the orchestra. Only about 7% of the audience wanted refunds, and those were sometimes, hard luck cases and people who we really had quite a bit of compassion for. So, there wasn't any, and then the rest of them held their money on account, and some of them are still holding on account. We have an orchestra of 58 American Federation of Musician contracted members. And under their contract, they are guaranteed 34 weeks of work with this organization. So in order to not break that contract, we scrambled hard and fast to develop a primo giving group. And that is the group that kept us in business. This small group that we've called Opus 21 came together as community sponsors and raised enough money to keep the orchestra paid, to keep the staff almost fully paid. We only lost a couple of staff members and had a 20% reduction during the 2021 season. But we worked the whole way through. We presented 8 online concerts and produced them ourselves, which I'll tell you what, a crash course in concert production is something that I never expected in my career. But we were blessed with a venue here in Louisville called Bricktown. I'm sorry, not Bricktown, but Paristown. This new concert hall actually already had 9 cameras installed and a sound system that enabled us to build out the stage in the empty hall and make it big enough for the orchestra to socially distance and record these concerts, present them live streamed, and then have them available. So I did sell subscriptions and tickets to those online concerts. We ended up with about 2,500 subscribers to the series. And quite frankly, only maybe about 70% of them were local and even Kentucky. We had people watching from as far away as Australia and quite a few through Europe. We had Japan watching. It was really quite amazing. 49 of the 50 states tuned in. So there may have only been one person in South Carolina, but there they were. And that was really a fascinating effort to go out with a completely online series. So we would do the live stream, and then we would take all of the footage from the 9 cameras plus 3 more that we had functioning in the venue and produce the concert that we then released on the video. So it was some of these concerts we ended up learning a lot about how to light, how to manage the sound, and how to present online. So with that information, we created over 100 education videos. And I'll tell you what, we were editing video until, we could do it in our sleep. We produced a series called Amazing Instruments of the LO with individual musicians presenting the details of their instruments, released to education, to teachers. We did a whole series of ensembles, teaching ensembles, which had been live in the schools in the past, but put them on video and presented them in a way that teachers could access them. The teachers were thrilled with having materials that they could present through their NTI. We also did live Zoom presentations and teaching classes through Zoom with coaching sessions and in-school projects that we tried to continue and keep connected as much as possible. We also had this strange little thing that was a Facebook Consolation concerts. And this was essentially Teddy Abrams. Teddy reached out and let people know, as our music director, that he was available on a half-an-hour schedule, and people had to sign up on his schedule to get 30 minutes of Facebook Live concert individually with Teddy. So he had this incredible process of going from one Facebook meeting to another with people and playing piano for them and talking with them and asking them what they wanted to hear and having these one-on-one or one-on, sometimes a few people joined in the conversation. He was trying to encourage our musicians to do the same on their own time. It didn't really get a lot of traction, but I'll tell you what, having a music director who took that kind of initiative to just talk to people, he said, frankly, some of the time he didn't really even play music for people. They just talked because of the isolation and loneliness that people were trying to get through. So it was really a big part of our effort is to try to break through on as many levels as we possibly could. At the very start, our musicians were playing what they called porch concerts, and they would just get together and play in their own neighborhoods. We often only heard about it after the fact. So they were very, very strong in their own initiatives. We ended up similar to Alyssa and similar to, I'm sure, what everybody was doing, was a lot of testing. And the Health and Safety Committee of our organization was a combined group of musicians and orchestra staff members. And we ended up doing PCR tests 2 to 3 times a week when we were playing and recording the online concerts throughout the 2020 and 2021 season. So we would all line up. We have these terrible pictures of long lines of people, and we're all standing 6 feet apart, all waiting to have our brains swabbed with these with the tests. And the cooperation was tremendous, and the camaraderie ended up being really marvelous, because the cooperation for this and the idea that everybody wanted to play and everybody wanted to be safe. So our vaccination rate within the organization was nearly 100%. And whenever we ended up with positive tests, the scramble to get replacement musicians to play those parts was a 4-state effort. Honestly, we reached out to everybody in Indiana, Ohio. You know, we were bringing people in from all over to play some of these parts. We had to cancel 2 concerts this season when we went fully live because we lost an entire brass section. So there was nothing to be done. There was no way to actually play the concert. So, and as has been also mentioned, the audiences have been tremendously flexible and really understanding. So after an initial flurry of shall we say discomfort on the side of some audience members when we announced that we were going to follow the COVID protocol set forth by our Performing Arts Center, which is a state facility. So they went fully conservative with their audience protocols. And as Alyssa mentioned, everyone comes through and presents a vaccination card or a proof of a negative test. Everyone is masked within the facility at all times, except when actively eating and drinking. So our audience members came in, and what we either heard was, "We will never come back because you're crazy for doing this," or "We are so glad you're doing this because we feel like we have a safe place to go." So during this current season, 21-22, we went back to live performances. We have 43 concerts that we present to the public, plus all of our education and community concerts. The opera and ballet have not been doing full productions, so that's been that's eased some of the pressure on the orchestra for the season. But we have been able to have audiences at all of those 43 concerts, and while they have been small, and yes, as all of the national statistics for orchestras tell us, we are bringing in about 50 to 60% of the audiences that we did in years past. I have 85% of my subscription subscribers that are still buying tickets, but they are not showing up. We have, of those 65%, probably about 50% are actually coming to concerts. So their loyalty is just really heartwarming. They're buying tickets with the notion that they are not going to attend. And that's that kind of loyalty and that kind of support is really a testament to the kinds of people who come to concerts and who support orchestras. So we also are watching the CDC recommendations, and we have also engaged 2 specialists who everybody calls the scientists, and we send our questions to the scientists, and they send us 6-page reports with their opinions and their recommendations and their distillation of usually there's a chart that says, if you do this, then this, and if you do this, then this, and giving us the choice of how careful to be, or how, you know, how expansive we can be. If you do not do distancing, then this. If you do not do masking, then that. It's been also a tremendous exercise in standing around watching smoke tests. And if you haven't done a smoke test, you haven't lived. We put a dry ice machine on stage and send out puffs of dry ice into the into the room to see which way the airflow goes and how quickly the particulates disperse. And this really did inform us, because we play in many different venues, and some of them were just unplayable. As a matter of fact, our primary rehearsal hall, we would not do a rehearsal in that room again, because, and we may never do another rehearsal in that room again, because the airflow was just poisonous. So we watched smoke rise from audience chambers in theaters all across the country. We were thrilled with improvements in the HVAC systems in a lot of these venues, because, you know, being able to tell both the audience and the orchestra members that the air exchange at our main concert hall is 4 times per hour. It was just, you could see the relief in people's eyes. We do CO2 testing to test for, you know, exhalations. And boy, there are some venues where CO2 testing told us a really significant story, that that exhalations were not going anywhere. And as those numbers climbed into very dangerous areas, we would you know, we would conclude concerts early to let people leave. To Alyssa's point of that limited amount of time in a venue before allowing it to the air to clear and things to get more safe. So we limited the warm-up time that musicians had in the theater, so they were not allowed to come in and warm up their instruments. So there were compromises made on the artistic side in order to have live performances. So masking, distancing, all of that stuff for the orchestra, but not necessarily for the audiences, or the distancing. We came back, when we came back to the 2021 or the 21-22 season, to audiences who would just sit where they were assigned, although many of them chose to move around, and that was of course fine with our venues. But again, like everyone else, more free concerts, more outreach, more reaching out to underserved audiences. I think that what we all came away from this with was a sense of how to serve our community in a social setting, and how to not just be more relevant, but to bring those things that only we can do, the community, the comfort, the inspiration, the you know, the connections to our community in ways that are more and more effective. So it shook us up in a big way, but I think it will have long-lasting positive effects for the community and for this organization, at least. So, plus the massive amounts of communication that Alyssa mentioned. Everybody's talking more, everybody's communicating more. We just have to. So it's been lots of silver linings to this, despite all of the hard work.
Michelle, I think that's actually a perfect segue into my first question. And it's mainly addressed to Allison and Faith, but certainly anybody can chime in. I was really struck by, you know, your saying that you did these outdoor concerts, and as anybody who, especially who's played a stringed instrument, knows, there's all kinds of considerations with the outdoor concert, and then you add, you know, humidity to wood on top of that, and then of course you have that many more. But it seems like with the neighborhood concert and with the concert in the park, you all had to have already have developed some partnerships with some civic organizations or with some neighborhoods. How were you able to leverage those in order to make those concerts happen, and have they strengthened those relationships that you had in place? So.
I'm happy to start on that. Yes, we have long-standing relationships with our Division of Parks and Recreation. We also had a very deep relationship with one park in particular, and it's called Castlewood Park, and it's in the north end of Lexington. And it's also where the Loudon House and the Lexington Art League are located. And we had done partnership programs with them in the past, and that was our primary outdoor space. And so also then, as we worked with Lexville in your neighborhood, we work directly with neighborhood organizations or homeowner associations. And that has continued into the work we're doing now. Also, our artistic collaborations have expanded through all of this. And again, it's because we are able to put resource into more smaller programs, and we're able to work with more partners and artistic collaborators in that regard, instead of all of our staff and financial resource going into main stage productions where we might work with 1 to 4 different artistic collaborators. Now we're doing that all over. So an example is we did a partnership with Josephine Sculpture Park in Frankfurt, and we did a symphonic stroll in the sculpture park, where we had ensembles positioned at different sculptures throughout the park. And that was huge. I mean, it was sold out. It was completely at capacity. We couldn't park another car at that facility. And we're going to be doing that again this year. That's our September program for 2022. So, but yeah, the challenge though continues to be, where do you put your resource? I mean, we're a very small orchestra. We're a very small organization, and you know, finances are limited. But as Faith said, there are opportunities for some new and different types of sponsorships that we haven't had before, because we're branching out into the community more.
I think great stuff, Allison. The thing that I could add, kind of going back to the beginning of Sarah's question about, you know, instruments and making sure that our musicians are protected. We have a great partnership with our city, which operates the park that's on the riverfront. And so musicians, for the most part, were in a covered setting. I will tell you that there were times that we scheduled something and we had to either change the ensemble or cancel it altogether. You know, if it's raining, nobody wants to be on it. We had a brass quintet scheduled. It got too cold for them to play outdoors, so we had to move along. Our partnership with the farmers market is just at the beginning. I believe it's gonna really grow more, haha, pun intended. And that is a covered space as well, and it comes with electricity and all the things. So if we need to have a keyboard out there or sound system, we can certainly have it. One partnership that has been really rewarding to watch grow is there's a very teeny tiny budding nonprofit called Beverly's Hearty Slice. This is a young man who lives in one of our underserved population neighborhoods. He's a real go-getter, and Beverly is his mother. And she used to serve the community food. And he every month on Friday, he serves pizza and desserts and other resources. So Gwen, our CEO, met the man who does this in one of her leadership initiatives, and they've continued a partnership. We've had a string quartet, a jazz trio, and a brass quartet out there to just interact with folks, talk and play. And it's been a wonderful thing to see grow. And now he's growing. He's going to do 2 more sites in the city of Owensboro. So we hope to grow that partnership with him. And, you know, I think truly the expansion of music on call has just been great to see. You know, our primary funder is our local hospital. They believe in arts and healing, and we believe that the arts are healing too. And that was another reason why we wanted to expand it, because we knew that people wanted the arts, that they needed it during the pandemic. And we just needed to find different connection points throughout. So that's all I can add to that.
Thank you. There's also been a question in the chat about how, Michelle, you talked about how you handled cancellations and refunds and vouchers and things like that. And then Allison, you have answered in text. If you could answer for your all's experience as well. I want to talk, Alyssa, you know, having an 11-year-old son in K through 12 schools right now, you have this very unique situation. And I know that in schools, in public schools, that's my only experience, the push and pull between keeping kids safe and wanting kids to engage and earn those, or not earn, but develop those social skills for the activities they were doing was very contentious at time. You go to any Facebook post from the district and you'll see all levels of interesting opinions about what people should be doing in spite of or because of what experts are saying. What was your experience? Because you know, unlike Allison and Faith and Michelle, they only have to deal with the musicians. You have to deal with the musicians and the musicians' parents. So how was your experience making sure people were safe, but also making sure that they got all of that good, those soft skills that they learned from being part of an orchestra and ensemble?
Mm-hmm. Well, one interesting thing is I think the students are just hungry for activity right now, and having rehearsals and concerts has been just a true lifeline for them. But it has manifested sometimes in the students coming far too early. They just want to be there. And we have things we need to be doing for setup and for our pre-screening that we're finding the students are so eager to get there that we've had to say, hold on. Make sure you know your arrival time and please don't come before it. So it's been a very positive experience with the students being engaged. But as I said before, I think that when students, especially very well-behaved orchestral students, which they tend to be, not all, but most, they're well-behaved and they're quiet and they're just doing what is asked of them, and it's a wonderful team effort when they are in rehearsals, and I really see them thriving when they're expected to play together and they're moving in tandem and they're bowing together. But when we have that time where they're not making music, I think that that's key. And as a former music educator, I think I'll always be a music educator at heart, transitions are really important for continuing the experience. And so I've been trying to work out an enriching and engaging time with the students, even when they're not on in rehearsal. Because I think that that's actually where you get the buy-in and the ownership from students. And that's where they grow their sense of identity and confidence as well. Not just in the music making, but also in how do they feel when they walk out of the room and start engaging with their peers? How many other students are they speaking with? How many opportunities do they have, maybe based on a prompt question or a prompt activity that we provide? We have site assistants who engage during each break, so it's not on just the conductors or me as executive director, but those site managers try to just engage. And then if maybe they're not, that we have 10 to 15 minute breaks several times throughout the course of rehearsals. We have other activities that they can do too. So we've been trying to do surveys, taking care of our demographic results for all sorts of reasons, and satisfaction surveys and things like that. So I think it's been good to tap into what do the students think, how can they meet other kids, how can they move into a space that allows them to grow in addition to the musical development that they're getting in rehearsal. And that's been really key. I find that the parents are dying to be in the space because they want to see all of this happening. So even though we have some limitations for that, they're finding a reason or two to kind of sneak in and see it. And overall, it's been a really successful thing despite the masks that cause this obvious barrier.